Hello everyone and welcome to Medford Anywhere Learning TV. We're glad you're tuned in. We want to give a shout out to our friends at Southern Oregon PBS, KTVL, KDRV, and the Dove Network. Thank you for hosting us on your station. In the Medford School District, we have one shared vision, and that we believe that all are learning, and learning is for all. And what better place to do that than right here on Medford Anywhere Learning TV.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Kristen Giroux and I am Associate Director of Artistic Engagement, Education, and Community at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And basically what that means is I'm in charge of doing workshops and working with students and teachers and creating curriculum and working with learners of all ages. And I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Kirsten. Hi, my name is Ben Garcia. I am the Education Coordinator at SOPBS. I do many things, but the flagship project that I coordinate that I'm most proud of is Student Reporting Labs, and that's a partnership with PBS NewsHour. And we have one Student Reporting Lab class here at Hedrick, actually. So anyhow, as Kristen mentioned, we are going to work through the three first activities of As You Like It, a lesson plan by Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and SOPBS. You can find that at PBS Learning Media. As I mentioned earlier, in the search bar, which is in the upper right-hand corner, if you search As You Like It, this lesson plan will come up right away. It has a procedure right below overview. There's a blue bar underlining overview. The next word over is procedure. If you go to procedure, you'll see the three activities that we're going to do today. And then there's a fourth project-based learning activity, which we will not have time for today, and it'd be worth your while to check that out. Kirsten is going to lead us through our lesson plans, so we'll go back to Kirsten.
Great, thank you. Well, we're going to do a couple of activities, and the first is really an introduction. The goal of it is to kind of get students' minds thinking about the theme of inheritance. And what kinds of things do they inherit? What kinds of non-physical things have they inherited? And also this investigation of this theme helps them to think about how it may inform the rest of the play, which is, of course, William Shakespeare's play, As You Like It. So our first activity is a sticky note activity or a Padlet activity. And here's how it works. The first thing you would have to do is get a whiteboard, and voila, here is my whiteboard. And the first thing you would need to do is to put your themes that you want to be discussing up on that board. And here you can see I've got inheritance, nature, brother, sister, spirit of father, and country versus city. Those are what we're going to talk with. And what you'd want to do is tell your students that that's what you're going to be looking at. And today, my students are Ben and Ivan. Excellent, thank you to our students. So then you would have a quick conversation with your students about some of these themes. So if we could, you two, could we talk a little bit about inheritance? I mean, what have you inherited from your family, your grandparents, somewhere in your life? What have you inherited already?
Thank you, Kirsten. Yes, in terms of inheritance, I think the most important thing that I've inherited from friends or family, it's probably been work ethic, which I got from my father, a very hardworking Mexican immigrant who immigrated to the United States in the late 60s, and he had to work really hard to support 9 kids, and so that is definitely something I'm proud of. What about you, Mr. Olinghouse, in the production booth?
Well, outside of inheriting my hair from my mother's father, I would have to say I inherited probably the most important thing in my life has been music from my family. I'm a music teacher myself, and I got that from my father, who taught me how to play French horn when I was young because he played French horn. And the reason why he played music was because his father had taught him as a young boy how to play music, as had my great-grandfather taught my grandfather. Those types of traits being inherited throughout our family has completely shaped and changed my life.
Those are great answers. And you can see right away that you've talked about some things that are not physical things that you inherited, right? Not just money, but sort of things that became part of who you are, like your work ethic or music being such a huge part of your life, right? So those are great things. Those are awesome things. I want to just talk about quickly, one of the things I inherited that's very meaningful to me is a set of earrings that were my grandmother's. And I wear them and I feel like they kind of give me strength at times that are difficult, and they've helped make me who I am a little bit. So that's a physical example of something like that. So let's just talk about nature if we could for a minute. What about nature? Could you talk a little bit about that, Ben and Ivan?
Absolutely. In terms of nature, I was really lucky to grow up in Talent, Oregon, very close to here. And so a big part of my inheritance is growing up so close to nature. Countless times growing up, my brothers and I would hike up into BLM land and get lost and be with the birds and trees. And so I consider that like a physical part of my inheritance. Mr. Olinghouse, what about you?
Yeah, I grew up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, and our family always referred to ourselves as, we like to think of ourselves as kind of like mountain folks. And it shaped our personalities. We started building our own stereotypes about who we were through that inherited vision of ourselves. Even though that doesn't necessarily extend all the way back in our family hereditarily, it is part of our immediate being nonetheless.
Again, those are awesome. They're beautiful answers. One of the things I want you to think about, and we don't have to talk about it right now, is that nature actually has some other meanings too. I mean, what is somebody's nature? Who are they? When Ben talked about inheriting his grandfather's or his father's work ethic, that became part of his nature, part of who he is, part of his character. So that's another way to think about that word. Let's take a look at brothers and sisters, brother or sister, siblings mean, and think about as you start to talk about this, what makes a good brother or sister? What makes a bad brother or sister? What does it mean to be a brother or sister? Go ahead, either one of you.
I think with brothers and sisters, I'm fortunate to have a brother and two sisters. And growing up, they were my older siblings. They were my role models in life. They were the ones who I was always chasing after, trying to surpass them, or at least try and match them on their deeds and milestones throughout their life. But also for brothers and sisters, I think forward in life, and I realize that there's those that are the ones that are not biological. I have my best friend in the whole wide world. He is very much so a brother to me, and he's the one who mentors me to this day, helps put me on my path when I'm start to veer off of where my life goals are, because he knows me as well as I do. How about for you, Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Olinghouse. In terms of this important theme, I'd have to piggyback off of what Ivan just said. In terms of having people that are connected to your family that kind of serve as like surrogate family members. Because my family was so big, 4 brothers, 4 sisters, a lot of us had friends that had parents that were kind of like second parents to us. And when I think about family, I think about the Lucas family, who I'm very close to, and my friend Justin's parents are like my second parents. And that's an interesting kind of motif, because that relates to this play As You Like It. And we'll get to that in a bit. Back to you, Kristen. What about you?
Oh, great. Well, I grew up in a big family. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so I get it all. And, I think one of my great joys in my life is I love having my brothers and sisters. I really do. And I've also been surprised over years how different we are. And sometimes that keeps us apart in a lot of ways. So that's just one thinking I have about that right now. So good, you can see, everybody, that we're starting to think a little bit more deeply. And Ben talked about that, something about his feelings about brothers and sisters is going to be in this play. So I want you to start to just pay attention to what people are saying, because we're going to move it eventually into a speech from As You Like It and see how these are in the play. Good. The next one I'd love to talk about, and this is different. I find that an interesting one, which is Spirit of Father. The Spirit of Father. And that's something that really shows up in multiple ways in this play. So think about that, and what might that mean to you?
Spirit of Father is a very important theme, and I've already touched on that, I feel. But if you're a person that feels like you can really feel your parents deeply, their feeling never leaves you. And even though my father is in Mexico right now, that's where he chose to retire, back in his hometown in Aguascalientes. I carry him with me every single day. Sometimes there's things that I do or say or ways in which I move. My wife will remind me that I have some of the same tics. And so you never get away from the spirit of your parents. Mr. Olinghouse, what about you? How does this theme touch you?
Yeah, I'd say the spirit of father is something that's really transformed over the course of my life. As a kid, I was always very attached to my father. And then growing up, I always found father-like figures in my teachers. And then I became a father myself, and it made me completely rethink what it means to have that to carry on that torch, that spirit of the father. And then as a teacher in my own professional life, I try and impart that onto my students as well, letting them know that I care with them within that spirit of being a father-like figure as well, to the best of my ability.
Great. I love that. Again, wonderful answers. And, I just have to answer for a moment because I'm a mother. And I want to make sure as you think about this theme, as you start to think about it more deeply, please think about mothers too. Spirit of Father is important in As You Like It, but I think it includes parents. And so allow yourself to think of that. I think one reason Shakespeare sometimes had fathers be so prominent is because oftentimes there weren't mothers. Women died in childbirth, and also because he had men playing all the roles on stage. So he had more male roles on stage than he had female roles. So let yourself think broadly. Think about the spirit of parents, mothers and fathers, as you continue to investigate that theme. Good. And then our final theme, which is really prominent in As You Like It and will be in the speech that we're going to explore, is this idea of city life versus country life. And and versus is an important word in there, right? That one might be better than the other. And that's sort of up to you to decide. And in fact, I'd love to hear, Ivan and Ben, how you reflect on city versus country.
The idea of the countryside versus the cityscape. I grew up in the countryside, and then in my youth, I moved to what I thought was a huge city of 20,000 people in Southern Oregon. And it completely changed my perspective of life. I was in complete culture shock for a while. And it took me a real long time to realize that the city wasn't worse than the countryside, because I was really lamenting the loss of the countryside from my youth. But that both really hold their own virtues, and they both have their own drawbacks. But at the same time, they are completely different places. They have different cultures about them. What's your take on this, Mr. Garcia?
This is a fascinating theme in the play and in real life. We live in Southern Oregon, and it's a rural area where we're at. We're in Medford, Oregon, to be exact, at this very moment. And as we're working our way through COVID-19 and the pandemic and all the various topics and issues that come with it, I feel like this theme is working out in our personal lives right now, because we live in a beautiful area and we have the opportunity to go out to trails and hike and be out in the middle of nowhere and get lost in nature. And I have a family member who lives in New York City, and living through this pandemic is very difficult for her because she cannot go get lost in the middle of national forest land. So this theme, I feel like, is so important right now at this very moment to be interrogated.
One of the things that I noticed with your observations, Ivan and Ben, is that you were talking a lot about country life and nature. And I just really saw how these two themes sort of talk to each other a little bit, right? So keep that in mind for our next step. And in fact, your brains now are oiled. They're ready to go. They're ready to start to investigate just a little bit further these 5 themes. And here's how you're going to do it. You all have a pen or pencil or a writing utensil, and you have some Post-its. And your task is you're going to do 5 Post-its, and you're going to fill a Post-it with information about these themes. So, for example, you're going to take one Post-it, and it's going to be your inheritance Post-it, and you're going to fill that Post-it with all the thoughts that you can come up with. And don't think about it too much. Just let it pour out of you. You're going to fill that Post-it with anything you can come up with about inheritance. And then you're going to take one and you're going to do the same for nature. And you're going to do the same for brothers and sisters. And you'll do the same for spirit of fathers and mothers, spirit of parents. And you'll do one final one for country versus city. All right? So you're going to have a few minutes to do this. And again, work quickly. Don't worry about it. Just put stuff on the page. It's only this size. This is something we can all fill in. All right? So take a few moments and have some fun. Go for it. Great. So after about 5 minutes, you have a conversation with your students about what new things did they discover from having to sit and actually think about these themes for a few extra minutes. What came out of their hand? And perhaps what surprised them? What was something that maybe they didn't even think of when we had our first conversation that they found when they had this moment longer? So Ben and Ivan, any new discoveries?
I did find out that I thought of some new themes and motifs that relate to each of these themes. And so we're going to take a look here at what I came up with for inheritance. Obviously, I talked about work ethic. I talked about nature. One thing that popped into my mind is I inherited a sense of empathy from my family. And obviously, growing up with lots of siblings will naturally instill a sense of empathy in you because there's lots of cooperation in a big family. As it relates to the theme of brother and sister, the first thing I thought of was I have this ironic appreciation for space and time because of having so many brothers and sisters. Growing up, I learned how to go away into nature and find space and time for myself. And as an adult right now, gosh, I love my downtime and I love my time by myself. Sense of community, a sense of democracy, a sense of sharing. These are all things that I got from my brothers and sisters. As it relates to the theme of nature, I talked about the appreciation and respect. I've definitely talked about the kinship I have with nature. And I thought of this word familiarity. In it, it has familia, which means family in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I definitely feel not only a kinship, but nature is so familiar to me. It feels very much like family to me. And then for the theme of country and city, I've talked about the freedom that one can find in nature if you live near nature out in the country, especially during these times we're going through right now. Culture in the city. I lived in Portland, Oregon for almost 10 years as I was working my way through 3 degree programs at Portland State. And gosh, there's so much wonderful culture in cities. And you actually don't have to go to big cities to find it. I mean, look at our amazing city here in Ashland, which has Oregon Shakespeare Festival and lots of amazing cultural aspects to it. One thing that I dislike about country versus city living, I don't know if I buy this theme, but in our media, it seems like there's this theme that there's a political divide between the country and the city. And so that's one sub-theme of country and city I don't like. Spirit of father, I talked about work ethic, and I don't need to talk about that anymore. And I agree with Kristen that there's definitely spirit of mother as a theme in many other works of literature. And I also got a lot of work ethic from my mother as well. Mr. Olinghouse, what about you?
Yeah, I had a couple that popped out to me while we were thinking. Part of it was thinking about how family values fall under our inheritance, who we are as people. And then another one that really popped out to me was when it comes to siblings, brothers, sisters, is how much they change expectations and the precedent of who we expect ourselves to be and the impact that we have on ourselves, and also modeling. And then the last one that I really, it's funny, you touched on this as well, Mr. Garcia, is that idea that between the country and the city, that you have, in the world right now, so much polarity in our culture. And it's just one more example of where we're seeing that polarity take shape.
Excellent. Those are great. What great thoughts again, right? And I love the connections that you all made to our world today, right? City versus country, that we do have a very polarized world. So it's great to be able to look at themes and kind of go, oh, look at how it relates to my life. Look at how it relates to, this year, 2020, right now, what's happening. So I think that's really terrific to be able to think like that. I'm just going to quickly tell you one of the things I discovered. I started actually with brother and sister, and because I come from not as big a family as Ben's, but we were a bunch of rugrats, and I wrote down, I'm a meanie. And then I noticed that under nature, I wrote impatient, can be mean. And then I found that there were several places that I actually put the same thing. And I think that that's one of those things that sometimes happens in a play, in a story, when you're creating a world, is that one idea shows up in lots and lots and lots of different ways. So this is great. Thank you for doing this work today, because our next activity, this is just an icebreaker. This is just a warm-up to the next thing that's coming up. We're actually going to be working on the opening speech spoken by a character by the name of Orlando. And we're going to hear him and what he has to say at the beginning. But also, you're going to find all of these themes. This idea of inheritance is introduced right away, and his certain anger about that. This idea of the natural world, the beautiful natural world, and sort of what one's nature might be. He has some very specific relationships with his siblings. The spirit of his father is very important to him. And finally, this idea of city versus country is going to show up as well. So keep these great discoveries that you made, and let's bring them into the speech and see how they show up in the play. Excellent. So our last step is that we are going to read out loud and in unison together the speech that we're going to be working on in our next step. And you may wonder, why the heck am I making you read this speech out loud together with everybody? Well, here's the reason why. First of all, it's Shakespearean text, and sometimes that's difficult to tackle the first time out, right? But also, when Shakespeare originally wrote these plays, he did not intend them to be read as literature. He intended them to be seen on the stage, inhabited by an actor, and spoken by that actor. So we're going to take our cue from that, and we're going to see the words on the page. We're going to hear them out loud as we speak and as we hear others read them. And we're also going to have that physical experience of actually saying the words out loud together. All right? So good. As we read through the speech, I want you to just remember we have explored those 5 themes of inheritance, nature, brothers and sisters, spirit of my father, and also of city versus country. And just remember that as we go ahead and read this for the first time. All right. So let's begin on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. As I remember, Adam, it was upon this fashion bequeathed me by will, but poor 1,000 crowns. And as thou sayest, charged my brother on his blessing to breed me well, and there begins my sadness. My brother Giroux he keeps at school, and report speaks goldenly of his prophet. For my part, he keeps me rustically at home, or, to speak more properly, stays me here at home unkempt. For call you that keeping for a gentleman of my birth, that differs not from the stalling of an ox? His horses are bred better, for besides that they are fair with their feeding, they are taught their manage, and to that end riders dearly hired. But I, his brother, gain nothing under him but growth, for the which his animals on his dunghills are as much bound to him as I. Besides this nothing that he so plentifully gives me, the something that nature gave me, his countenance seems to take from me. He lets me feed with his hinds, bars me the place of a brother, and as much as in him lies, minds my gentility with my education. This is it, Adam, that grieves me. And the spirit of my Father, which I think is within me, begins to mutiny against this servitude. I will no longer endure it, though yet I know no wise remedy how to avoid it. Excellent. Well read, well read. Before we stop, I just want you to tell me out loud, any words or phrases you remember reading through this speech once. Ben?
Most definitely. Right away I see, and I noticed when we were reading it, Spirit of my Father is literally pronounced, and that is one of our themes that we have been interrogating today. Mr. Olinghouse, was there something that popped out to you from that reading?
The part that really popped out to me was when he said, "But I, his brother, gained nothing under him but growth." And I have to say, I sympathize with him greatly on that particular point. That's the one that really it caught me somewhere special.
Great. Good. Well, hold on to all of this, and we'll make our way to the next exercise.
If you are watching this episode on television, our half hour is coming to a close, and so you'll have to stay tuned for part 2, where we will go over our next activity called the sleuthing activity. If you are online at YouTube, you can find part 2 just right here in the Southern Oregon PBS Education YouTube channel. There's lots of videos here, and the part 2 of As You Like It should be there. And if you are on PBS Learning Media, it'll be very easy to find part 2. It'll be embedded in the lesson plan. Thank you for joining us at Medford Anywhere Learning TV. Please stay tuned for part 2. So, thanks for joining us
on Medford Anywhere Learning TV. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Medford Anywhere Learning TV. Medford School District is a place where all are learning, and learning is for all.
You guys make me jump for joy. Happy Teachers Week.
Gracias, señora, por ayudarme a hablar español. Tú eres muy increíble. Adiós.
I'm at the school picking up my stuff. I want to wish all the teachers a happy Teachers Day at 2020 quarantine.
Miss Hopkins, you are the best teacher ever. Heart you rainbow, because you're a rainbow.
Hi, Mrs. LaBelle. Hi, Mrs. Southmaid. I love when you read stories to us, and I like when you give us hugs. Happy Appreciation Week. I miss you. Bye.
Hi, Mr. Gurtell and all the other teachers at Griffin Creek, and thank you for all you do. Hi, Mrs. Bennett. I miss you, and I wish I can be in class with you today.
Teacher, I like you because you're so cool and you teach us a lot of stuff.
Teacher, I love you because you help us stand on a ball.
Thank you, Misty.
And Mrs. Marquez and all the other teachers at Griffin Creek. I miss you guys all. And thank you for all you guys do. Bye.
Thank you for doing Zoom meetings with us.
Thank you, Mr. Pyle.
Thank you for teaching us at school and online.
Armstead, you're a treasure!
Thank you very much, Miss Hess, for being my teacher through this very hard year, and it has been hard, but thank you for getting through it, and just being happy and about it, and also thank you for inspiring me to work harder on the subjects that I have not yet mastered.
Mac teachers are flipping great.
Hola, señora Bennett. Gracias por traerme que me mandaste trabajos muy fácil y también gracias por hacer tus videos de YouTube.
Thank you for teaching us in school and online.
Thank you, Miss Edwards, for being the best teacher you can. My heart is filled with happiness. You bring joy and laughter to this classroom. Congratulations of winning Teacher of the Year. Happy Teachers Week.
You're the best teacher ever. You're nice, kind, caring, awesome, and smart.